very important but oft forgotten topic, that we need competition to innovate, and how does competition accelerate AI innovation. And for a perspective of a competition economist who has looked at the digital platform dominance very closely at the competition regulator's office, this is kind of a deja vu moment, because there have been cases, there have been not only in India but in other jurisdictions, where the platformization of digital markets has thrown up issues where we see that platforms, through their exclusive control over, say, search engines, retail e-commerce, app stores, cloud storage, and social media, control the internet's bottleneck infrastructure. An entire ecosystem of multiple actors, that is consumers, advertisers, and app developers, depend on them from survival. One word which has come out from all the law currently is dependencies. And the story is a different this time in this new technological cycle, as we have stepped into the AI world. Uh, there are concentration risks, primarily stemming from the dominance of few major players, some new, but some old from the previous cycle, across various layers of AI technology stack, including hardware, cloud computing, foundational models, and distribution. The challenge is about platform, not only about platform dominance, but I think the underlying challenge is about the data hegemony that sustains this dominance. So how does a global south, the fact that India AI Impact Summit is in the global south, shape digital sovereignty? And sovereignty, as we'll unpack in this discussion and unlayer the aspect and the meaning of sovereignty, has various dimensions in the AI age that will be in most of the global south smartphone led. So how does the consumer, how do individuals, how do businesses reclaim agency, talking about autonomy and agency? So AI also becomes an operating layer or a foundational layer of its own. If the base operating system and app stores are controlled still by a handful of companies, and the infrastructure that runs AI models sits also on these handful hyperscalers, the global south risks becoming a feature controlled by the platform. A competitive open source AI stack built on affordable compute, local cloud options, and locally trained model is essential for innovation. I'm saying all this in the assertive, but we can debate this, discuss this with our esteemed panelists here. So it gives me great pleasure. The names are already there, but for formality's sake, we have Mr. Augustine Peter, former member, Competition Commission of India; Shweta Rajpal Kohli, she is the founder director of the Startup Policy Forum India; Ambakak, who is the co-director at AI Now Institute US; and Karsh Amlani, who is head and director of competition law public policy at Mozilla. So just to start the discussion and just to set up the landscape and the scene, I want to get the perspectives of all the panelists, that what are the key factors up at play here? Is there a concentration risk or no? Things are still shaping up, the technology is still evolving, and let us wait and watch. So I could begin with Mr. Peter, you, if having worked at the commission, do you see the same playbook playing here, or is it different this time?
Thank you very much, Payal. Happy to be here. Yes, coming straight to the question, there is certainly a concentration risk in this area of AI. We have seen in the working of competition law in India as well as in many other countries that digital firms and involving AI, they have been frequently involved in investigations and penalties. The digital or to be very precise, AI firms, they originate or they from two specific countries, the United States and China, which have stated to be around 92% of the sort of control or air resources. Now, coming to, I think I am speaking specifically again about India and the developing countries. See, India is in a position only to be at the last end where the consumer interface is there. While coming to the initial stages of AI uh, protocol, even a country like India is nowhere in the picture. The issue of data sovereignty is very real. Countries do not have the ability to control the large firms which are vertically integrated and which are in a position to flex their muscles, which are in a position to use their market power to overwhelm the competitors if at all power is there, and also ensure that competition doesn't come up. Vertical restraints as also killer acquisitions, which are rampant. A country like India, which is supposed to be having technological prowess in many areas, atomic energy, space, but still India finds that there is no match. A lot of efforts have been made, but in the case of competition authority, any issue is raised, it takes long time and number of steps, stages coming from CCI to appellate tribunal to the Supreme Court. By the time a sector like or AI or digital area, there is a sea change. Where we started, things are not relevant by that time. So the question concentration is real and it has got implications not just for sovereignty but also for consumer interest, where exploitative conduct is very much possible and is happening. Thank you.
Thanks. And yeah, I think so. You set up the prompt pretty well. I to answer your question, I do think there are serious market concentration risks writ large across the AI supply chain, and I think all of them are rooted not in the moment starting ChatGPT in 2022, but in the last 10 years of what we have seen that came before that. And so it's not just a question of like, what can we learn from the last decade as a theoretical question? It is very much the source of understanding where market power resides today in the AI market. But yeah, I think to kind of get a bit more concrete, we're somewhat familiar, and I think the kind of common intuition around the AI market is that the choke points and the barriers to entry are most heightened or most extreme at the kind of foundation model layer, at the training of these extremely large models, and the barriers to entry are obvious, as are the constraints on input, whether those are compute or chips or cloud computing, the vast eye-watering amounts of capital required to train these models. But equally, I think the intuition seems to be from many people that downstream is where we will see 1,000 flowers bloom, and that is where everybody, the global economy, startups have a share, a fighting chance at getting some of the pie. And while I want that to be true, and that sense is very much, I think, what guided Judge Mehta in the Google search decision, for example, I think instead of optimism, what we need right now is vigilance and rules of the road. And the reason for that is it's just a simple hypothetical, which is why wouldn't these extremely giant firms, as was just pointed out, that already control inputs, but much more importantly, have an outsized role in controlling distribution and pathways to monetization. Why would they be content in sitting upstream? Why wouldn't they do everything at their disposal to cannibalize revenue, to cannibalize value downstream? And I think we're seeing big tech firms act out both defensively and proactively to eke out with edged elbows to take what they can. And hopefully we get into this into the discussion, but maybe I'll say one more thing here, which is the in this idea that like the application layer is where we're going to see democratization. It's also important, I think, to track the ways in which healthcare and finance and education, the key sectors where we hear these big stories coming, are also where some of these firms are moving really proactively and sometimes in stealth mode, to kind of capture value, not just by playing in these markets, but also in terms of how they're envisioning revenue share. So the example I want to give is Sam Altman recently said that his idea for how they make a return on these eye-watering amounts of capital they're spending is, actually buying equity stakes, for example, in any hospital that gains efficiency gains using AI. And I think that's a good reminder that these firms aren't going to sit back and allow markets to prosper. They're going to do everything they can to, I think, both get a share of and potentially cannibalize value downstream.
Yeah, thanks, Amba, and thank you, Mr. Peter. And that's where I think Shweta comes in, because Shweta, we are very happy with what our startups are doing, the applications which are coming out of the startups. But the foundational layer, again, as I said, in a smartphone led AI, would be the operating system, which is again controlled by a handful of players. That's one. So, therefore, the old issues of default search engine may now translate into a default chatbot, uh, self-preferencing, time bundling, etc. And the monetization question, which has been raised by Amba, is that the app developers in the again sitting on these play stores were paying or expected to pay a hefty fee of 30% of each and every monetary transaction. How do the startups then see their relationship with these big technology companies when they are doing their applications? And is it a synergetic relationship, or is there some bit of expropriation?
Thank you, Payal. A topic very, very close to my heart. And I can tell you that I wear many hats when I sit here. Of course, we run the Startup Policy Forum, which is an industry platform, as the name suggests, to do policy advocacy for startups. And it was set up a little over a year ago with the idea of handholding the Indian startup ecosystem on multiple platforms. And the reason why we decided to keep the term policy in our name is that we should not lose scope of the fact that that is what is our main ikigai. It's our main mission, that we always want to be seen as the voice of India's new economy and startups. But I think life has got complicated a lot in the last year or so. Firstly, a lot of people ask us, who is a startup, right? I mean, when we use the word startup, people have very different notions, and it has become a catch-all phrase, especially at a time when you have a country like India where the head of the state, Prime Minister Narendra Modi himself, is such a champion of the startup ecosystem. His Startup India plank and the success around it has led everyone to want to be associated with the startup ecosystem. At the same time, our membership, for instance, does consist of decacons, listed companies. So are they really startups? And that brings me to the point of how new economy, both in India as well as around the world, is changing. And that flows a lot into this whole competition debate. I think things are changing faster than what we can even anticipate. And that is leading to definitions being blurred. And I also come from someone who's worked with big tech, having worked with Uber, Salesforce. I understand how big tech would think. And I also, having spent close to 2 decades in the media, I also understand the significance of narratives and how those play out. So, given what's going on, I think first I want to say that uh, when you talk competition, the whole definition of who is suddenly a dominant player is changing quicker than you can imagine. If 2 years ago, would OpenAI be considered a dominant player, and is it considered one today? And if today NVIDIA is investing in OpenAI, how is that changing that landscape? And how is that impacting a startup sitting here in India? So the question I have is that while today regulators are grappling with how to manage concentration risks that are real and perhaps heightened in today's times, because this is a technology that is very capital intensive and plays out on the back of capital flowing in. I mean, you need the compute, you need the infrastructure for innovation. It's not one of those earlier waves of innovation ecosystem where you could just innovate without infra. Here you need the infra, and that itself means concentration risks have gone up because how many people have access to capital, right? And capital will become a key determinant in this. But I think what's also made this whole journey very, very confusing and interesting is that the voices I'm hearing from startups are more around collaboration than competition or concentration risk. And that makes it very exciting because when I talk to some of the founders and I'm like, are you worried about dominance? Are you worried about this? And they're like, no. Hey, can you get us a meeting with OpenAI? Can you get me into the room with NVIDIA? Can you get me into the room with Google? So I'm hearing that a lot more. And that makes me realize the founders are like, you know what? Let's embrace technology. Let's understand. So when we took a delegation of founders to the Valley and to DC and New York recently, I mean, just the palpable excitement of the Indian startup ecosystem to embrace what's going on in the world is right now so high that I don't even think these conversations have started filtering down to their level yet.
Yeah.
And I know I'll hand it back to you to say, of course, during the discussion, we would like to talk about how we need those safeguards in place. And it's on the regulators today, more than the innovators, to put those safeguards in place because you know what? Innovators are just excited right now. We're all like little kids who are very excited. We have a new toy to play with.
Yeah, so a quick rebuttal because I want to get
A
Khush in.
little bit fun.
Yes. Yeah.
I think the two things I want to say to that point on startups sort of approaching this with collaboration. One is that last year, 75% of total startup funding came from three companies, Google, Microsoft, and Amazon, who also happen to be the hyperscalers that control the infrastructure in this market. And not just that, I think what we're hearing both in the enterprise and consumer space, again, a very familiar story to all of you that have been in this space for a long time, is that the pathway to success for startups often does look like getting acquired by one of these same companies. So I guess I just want to put a kind of a pinch of salt or a sobering note to why the startup community might not be looking to file the
And
latest
yeah,
case
and just
against
to add to
AI
what she's
overviews
saying,
and
partnerships are now being looked at closely even by competition authorities because these partnerships don't come without strings attached when it comes to data, when it comes to bundling, when it comes to, and again, the old playbook. Kush, I want to get you in now because you have, to what extent you think the Indian challenges are there in the other parts of the world, but more importantly, India has now taken another path, that is combined industrial policy with competition policy, where India wants its startups to get some agency. And so therefore, when it comes to compute infrastructure, data infrastructure, talking about openness. So how is openness then an alternative? And I will also move to sovereignty issue in this discussion, because sovereignty does not necessarily mean ownership, but sovereignty would mean some kind of an agency. And how do you think that openness is that a good way to start to give some agency to the application layer?
Yeah, thank you. So I am here representing Mozilla, which is the best known for the open source browser Firefox, right? And we touched on cloud, we touched on compute. What we haven't, and we touched a little bit on the application layer, but what really matters and often isn't discussed in the conversation is the lower part of the supply chain, distribution, right? We're talking operating systems, we're talking browsers, we're talking search engines, we're talking apps, right? That's the part that really hits consumers. And where is that world today? Where has it been for the last 2 decades? The answer is that those markets have already tipped, right? So we're not playing on a level playing field. And so this foundation, this AI house, is being built on wonky foundations already. So what can we expect is obviously a wonky house, right? That's how I look at it. And that's what we see every day in the markets that we compete in, especially in the browser space and in operating systems. And the reason that that's often missed is because it's the part that impacts consumers. And I think if we put people and consumers kind of back at the forefront of our conversation, then we will get to this answer. We will come back to this, and we'll think about innovation in a way that really impacts people. You asked about sovereignty as well, so I might just skip ahead a little bit and talk about that just very quickly, because I think one of the things that really occurs to me in this space is that we're competing and innovating, and startups are competing and innovating, but how much of that innovation is really disruptive, right? How much of it comes from outside the market and really changes the paradigm? And from what I can see, there is great startups doing great work. There is a lot of dynamism, but I'm not sure that true innovation really exists. And union ministers in India have said it. Some of the data says it as well. And so, of course, a lot of these companies are seeking to collaborate and in some cases compete, but the playing field is already tilted. And so trying to compete is very, very difficult. And what we need is real action in this space.
Yeah, so I just want to push a little bit more on the idea of sovereignty, because I have been working now as a researcher on that issue. Of course, India's role of bringing in sovereignty through the digital public infrastructure route is now going to the global south. Digital public infrastructure is one way to to remove yourself from these dependencies, and especially digital public infrastructure in the use cases in AI are leading to greater adoption in, say, agriculture, education, health tech, etc. But again, there we are back to still certain dependencies. And how are these dependencies playing? So Kush has mentioned about being dependent on for distribution. Mr. Peter mentioned about vertical integration, that, and Amba also said, don't be too surprised that these partnerships lead to a situation where the so-called very widely open app field then gets also captured by some of these companies. Mike, I again coming to the sovereignty issue, we may be sovereign in certain aspects, bringing out the solutions based on vernacular languages, contextual, etc. But still, there is dependencies on the private cloud and AI infrastructure. And there is a paper which I recently read, which was very interesting, Sovereignty as a Service, where these large companies are offering these services for sovereignty in a defined space. So, Amba, if I start with you again on this round, about is this about openness? Is there some open washing going on when it comes to openness by the big tech companies? And secondly, how should sovereignty be interpreted?
Yeah, look, I think openness and open weighted models, just to take a narrow example of what openness could mean, I think should be a floor. It's a no-brainer, and there are baseline reusability and democratization, if you want to call it that, effects that come from that. But I also think that often the frame of open source AI is sort of brandished as a silver bullet to obscure the much deeper dependencies that we've all talked about, whether those are at the distribution layer or at the infrastructural layer. So I guess like my one sentence TLDR on this is, yes, openness is the floor, but also like don't let it become the thing that makes you look away from these more structural dependencies. But I think one of the interesting things I've been sitting with at this intersection of open source or open weighted models and sovereignty actually came from President Trump's AI export AI order, which is maybe some of you have heard of it, maybe not. I think it's really interesting because through that particular policy and the discussions that have happened around it, sort of straight from the horse's mouth, what is being, what we're being told is that open weighted models and open source AI could just as well be a tool for reinforcing and spreading US hegemony. And so I want to put that out there as a provocation and explain that a little bit. So what does this export order say? It says that open weighted models should be supported as the policy of the United States, because we want to make sure that, companies, but really much more importantly, governments everywhere are building on a US stack. And it makes it much easier to build on a US stack if these are, it's the meta open source business strategy, right? But now take it to the US government. So I think that's, I want to flag that because it's interesting to see the US put its diplomatic and financial muscle. What is contemplated under this executive order is that the US government might be actually giving loans to to other countries, third-party countries, to procure the American AI stack. Yeah,
So
you
I'll
want to?
stop you there because I want to bring in Mr. Peter. How is India doing? Because India is following industrial policy heavily when it comes to AI by bringing in sovereign compute, access to data sets. But do you think is it sufficient? Or so can we do with an industrial policy? By the way, industrial policy used to be a cuss word when it came to competition policy because they were thought to be antithetical to each other. But now industrial policy instrument is being used to bring in some bit of competition so that users in India at least have access to these resources without the hegemony of the large companies. Do you think India is doing sufficient? We have competing interests. Why should we be spending so much of money on AI? Or more needs to be done?
Thank you. Actually, it's a very complex issue. Having sovereignty at the same time, having the liberty to have the consumers have access to services. At the same time, the most important thing is creating domestic talent and also promoting domestic investment and innovation. These are all mixed up. We know for certain that the large firms which are operating in the country, basically from the United States, they have spread their wings all over. Large number of consumers, I think they are relying on that. At the same time, India being a country, fourth largest economy in the world, an aspirational nation, it cannot afford to depend on the foreign the dominant firms forever. So we have to do our country has to do the balancing. And where is the issue? Because sovereignty is important in not just in the sense of other products. Here, their interference is possible in different ways. In the election process, there have been reports different time, different countries. In the case of also the confidential secret information of the country can be accessed. So a number of issues are involved at the same time. There is a social purpose because if the country's 1 billion population is having access to the services of, for example, Google, that is having some positive effect. Now, what is government policy regarding industrial policy versus competition policy? That is the issue you have posed. So we cannot compare ourselves with the European Union, where they are more concerned about the consumer interest. Even in United States, we have seen in the recent past, maybe 4, 5, 6 years, consumer interest, consumers protection against the power of digital giants efforts are being made. In our case, the issue is that we have to also develop simultaneously the capability within the country. I have seen that our minister, who himself is an expert in this area, he is stating that we will be sort of showcasing some extraordinary developments in the Indian space by Indian companies. I am looking forward to that. What are we missing here? The most important thing is that we have talents, but only in name. Substantial, the core of the talent, the cream, they just go out. And the talent, we are not able to, while China was able to attract back, they used to send hundreds of thousands of engineers to United States at the cost of the government want the conditions that they will come back. They have been coming back. In our case, they don't come back. What is the reason? Industrial policy, we cannot reduce it to industrial policy versus competition policy. The ecosystem has to change drastically.
Yeah, so I
This-
just would like to stop you there because, again, coming back to the compulsions, there's always a binary made between the fact that we need investments, India need investments, and loads of it. And big companies are investing a lot in this AI technology. So, does that mean when there is investment, we lose control on our laws? Or both can happen. India is a large country, India provides a huge market, but the laws of the land can still operate. So, Shweta, what is the investment hand holding of these companies? Because, as you mentioned, does it then feeble us to impose and to implement our laws? Just 2 minutes because I want to get to the next
Yes,
one.
I'll very quickly tell you what the government of India's thinking is around this. And it was a very specific question I had posed to Secretary Krishnan a few months ago when we were hearing confusing messages coming from the government, right? On one hand, there was a very clear, a little bit of a Swadeshi message saying, oh, you know what, Minister Ashwini Vaishnav is saying, I'm going to use only Zoho. On the other hand, we saw the top brass of the ministry at the Google Vizag $20 billion announcement there. So I think when we try to understand, the government's very clear. And the answer that I got very clearly from Secretary Krishnan was, we're going to do both. We will do everything it takes to build up our own infrastructure, our own AI infrastructure, to get the compute ready, to support and we've seen the fruits of that. Everyone seemed to have dismissed India when it came to frontier models. There was, India has missed the bus, oh, India is too late. And now today, see the excitement around Sarvam, and that's the launch that is happening 2 days from now. And that frontier model today, many global experts are saying is perhaps way better than some of the best that we've seen built so far. At the same time, I think the message coming out both from the industry and the government is, India is going to do AI the India way. And that will not be the US way. It will not be the China way. Because you know what? If LLMs don't work for us and small models work for us, we will go the small model way. If it's all about voice AI, then India will be the voice AI market. If it's going to be all about vernacular languages as well as the Indic languages and building on Indian data sets that bring you models that are more suited to Indian audiences, then that's what you're going to get out of India.
Right. So let us take what Shweta is saying. She says basically we'll do both. We'll build strategic capacity, and the government has made it clear and is means there are signs of it, that we'll not lose our autonomy when it comes to enforcing laws, enforcing contestability, be it competition law and other governance instruments. So this brings me to the next section, and Kush, I would want you to intervene because of your experiences elsewhere. What are the remedies? Because now the technology is evolving. Do we want to be in the same place as in the previous cycle, that wait till the harm occurs? Because that's the refrain which new technologies and technology developers give, that don't do anything right now, it's too early and it'll harm innovation. Are there trade-offs, or are we have many lessons and we know it all and we should bring in new instruments and new remedies to address this issue of competition?
Thank you. So just to pick up on Shweta's last point, there was an interesting speech by Mark Carney, which was picked up at the World Economic Forum a few weeks ago, right? And he said that if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And
Yeah.
I want to push back on that, because I don't think you want to sit at that table, right? Like, I think, Shweta, what you're saying is India's way, and the way of countries, in the global majority, can be to build their own tables, right? Not to be forced to sit at a different table. And so I think that's the right way to look at it, and I think that's the way that you were describing. But it kind of occurred to me when I was thinking about that speech that he made, because I've seen that phrase bandied about a lot in the context of this summit as well. And so to come to kind of the solutions, it's funny. This morning I was really scared I was going to be jet lagged, wake up at 11 o'clock, and miss this session altogether, right? And if you think about ex post competition enforcement, that's effectively what's happened, right? It's woken up way too late, and digital markets have already tipped, as we said earlier, and often what you find is that the solutions are too late, remedies are too late. The companies that they're trying to protect or to remediate the harm has already occurred, and the companies have already exited the market. Innovation is already lost, and so in my view, what's needed is ex ante regulation in this space. Competition policy and industrial policy are clearly now two sides of the same coin. They achieve the same objective from different angles, and we've seen this play out a little bit in Europe in the context of things like the Digital Markets Act. And now I'm not saying that India needs exactly the Digital Markets Act. What India needs is a law that works for India, but that allows the CCI and allows the courts and regulators to come in proportionately, quickly, and to provide solutions that avoid what we've seen for the last 20 years, which is often waking up too late and missing the whole show, right? So I think that's really what we're after, and that's really what urgently is needed, not just in India actually, but in other countries as well. It should be flexible, it should be proportionate and forward-looking, so that it can add new products to the regulation quickly, and so that it can react to what's happening in the market. It doesn't have to be heavy-handed, but it has to be quick.
So I'll get Shweta, but Amba, quickly, what is the one thing as a legal instrument for competition, if not a full-fledged cut, copy, paste of the DMA, which a country like India could do with to at least open up the system?
I'll say the one thing, which is also maybe in the list of the boldest thing that we could do in terms of ex ante interventions, I think, is some structural separations that get at the infrastructure layer. So if you're playing in the cloud market, you can't be playing in every other point or any other point in the AI stack. And I just want to say one other thing on this idea of strategic capacity and how we do it. There's a really interesting quote from that has been coming up in the context of the death of USAID and other development institutions, which is that I think finally the US realized that if the development mission actually succeeds, then it becomes quite threatening to the US hegemony generally. And I think the same is true for AI. This is going to be a fight, and I think there is a lot of lessons to be learned in the ways in which big tech companies, I'll name Microsoft because it's the example at the top of my head, when the UK CMA was making moves, I won't even say they were big moves, but they were opening market studies and asking questions about the AI market, was just the moment when they announced extremely large investments into the UK sovereign cloud mission, right? And so I think that in both subtle and pretty unsubtle ways, there's every interest in the world for big tech to make sovereignty, as you said, a service.
Shweta, yes, you wanted to intervene.
Yeah, no, I think just to add to that point, and perhaps to what Kush was saying, I think the thinking within the government right now is that anything that is seen remotely as being more heavy-handed, and anything which comes in the realm of a competition or ex ante would be in that definition. At the same time, I think the government's grappling with the fact that things are changing too quickly. And the one thing we saw was, for instance, around deepfakes that came out just a few days ago, with very short timeline implementation around AI and copyright. Competition is top of their mind. The government is very clear. I mean, of course, there were the same noises when GDPR was there, that, oh, India needs its version of GDPR, and we took our own sweet time of 10 years to come up with our own DPDP rules. I think the government's not going to emulate any one act or regulation. That is very, very clear in the mind of Indian policymakers. We're not going to go down the Europe route. We're not going to go down the US route. It will be regulation suited to India. And once they've evaluated every single piece of legislation that currently exists in India, including the new data privacy rules, the Data Privacy Act, as well as what exists, the sense is that and the Competition Act, the sense is that right now it is sufficient to cover for potential harm, as you mentioned. And as and when there will be cases where they feel the harm is exceeding, they will bring in the smaller pieces of these notifications and regulations, but I don't see an overarching change coming.
Yeah, so Mr. Peter, your view, being you have worked at the Competition Commission as a member, do you think legislative tools are important, or we can tinker with the current law? There are interim measures available, Section 33 is available. So what is your view on that?
No, my feeling is that we have to strengthen CCI. Ex post, we have to speed up. Actually, there is an effort to build a sort of AI team in CCI. Why don't? Why is the delay? It has to be expedited. That is one. Second, I have an apprehension which many of us have of India having an ex ante system. We have the story of or the history of competition, MRT commission, where there is a tendency to deteriorate into a mechanism where everything is stalled. So I think the issue is that ex ante for the time being for India, no. Yes, a specific issue as it has been stated, specific issues when they arise, it can be addressed for the time being. Otherwise, CCI has to be strengthened.
So, Kush, if I get, because see, Japan did it with one instrument regarding the operating systems and software operating systems. They brought out one law, one to open up that system. So, what is an alternate? Can so India also do at least? So that's why I'm saying, what is one thing? What is the lowest hanging fruit which can be brought out through one legal instrument and not through a full-fledged set of rules?
So let me answer that with a question, because the question is, what is the outcome you're trying to achieve, right? And then work backwards from there. This is what we want. We want interoperability, right, at every layer of the stack. We want open source, encouragement of open source solutions, again, every layer of the stack. We want open standards. We want user choice, right? That's really, really important. Don't forget people. Again, like, what is the best tool to achieve that? I would love to hear how Xpost is able to achieve that. I would love to hear how we can actually do that in digital markets, in AI, given the speed that it's moving. And if that solution exists, then please bring it to me. In my view, a sort of a narrow, flexible, proportionate bit of regulation is really what will have that impact. We've seen otherwise that courts and regulators will not be able to move quickly enough in the current framework otherwise.
So a narrow, you said, will have that impact? A narrow, proportionate, ex ante set of rules would be the way India could go, rather than having across digital service, across markets, but the principles of openness, interoperability, because I think interoperability is the key, because until and openness where, which layer, open data, open infrastructure. Amba talked about open, even the models, not just open washing, but exactly what needs to be open, such that they can be used properly by and innovated upon by the startups. So some kinds of consensus, at least in that part of the table, is arising. And if I know we are short of time, a quick question from the audience, one or two questions, otherwise, yes, and please introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Nikhil Pava. I'm the founder of Medianama. I'm just wondering about why we're discussing models when OpenAI and Gemini have already platformized and they're giving free services in India. Why are we discussing models when Google search and AI mode crawlers are exactly the same and there's no separation between them? When WhatsApp is preventing external AI bots from coming, from delivering services on the WhatsApp platform, that competition debate is getting addressed by the market, already, and we're still discussing models.
Let me go through like this. Yeah. So Amba, you start and we'll go through like this.
Example of why I think we need early intervention, right? Slowly we're seeing how the AI overview. Oh, so I guess his point, I guess we can all agree that it's already late.
So he's saying the markets have tipped.
Yeah. The markets have tipped. And to be honest, I don't disagree. I think that some truth telling about where we are in this cycle is in order. I do think that market signals matter. As someone, full disclosure, that was part of the FTC during Chair Khan's administration, I can tell you that market signals, even when they were in sort of adjacent markets, do change the atmosphere around certain killer acquisitions and whether they are contemplated and how they are pursued. So I guess in the spirit of trying to do trying to do something versus nothing, I think acting soon in ways to, for example, why is AI overviews, how we sort of letting Google get away with renegotiating that bargain in real time and sort of seamlessly transitioning their search
and simple
to AI
bundling
market.
of the
it's
as
all
a default.
just,
it's the same story.
there's
again.
a whole long list, I guess, of low-hanging fruit. And probably neither one of those things will on their own do much, but I think at least they will send a signal to the market that someone is watching.
Yeah, somehow, so therefore, I'm a fan of the Japanese law. At least they brought in one law for something very targeted, and at least do something rather than doing nothing. Yeah, one last round of one thing which you would, I guess, it is a trick question. One piece of advice, Mr. Peter, will starting with you, the most senior person on this panel. One piece of advice you would like to give. You have given about the strengthening CCI, but in competition matters, what should the policymaker look at, or do nothing and wait again?
I would suggest that there should be a competition policy because see, there are a number of gaps. There have been committees set up. Mr. Vinod Dalgi is sitting here, and later also, but it has not been acted upon. I think what that will serve a very important purpose by having a competition policy in place. That will serve the purpose.
Shweta.
Yeah, I want to actually quickly respond to Nikhil because I know his positions on most issues and a big fan of Media Nama. But I just want to say that while I know he's being almost sarcastic by being fatalistic, I also think it's about embracing the reality. And as Amba said, it is true. The markets have tipped. So I think, and that is exactly what I was referring to when I talked about founders, because from a conversation of, oh, like, is big tech dominating? Oh, obviously, to now saying, you know what, let's get a piece of the pie. So already that conversation is shifted. But I also want to bring in a caveat, because I may have sounded like I'm in that camp. I think that's when the role of all of us comes in, because it's my job as much to speak to founders and say, you know what, this is great, I'm supporting you, let's keep going on that path, but you know what, watch out, remember this happened. Because if all of us don't do that, then we're not doing the right service for our communities and saying and in highlighting some of the dangers of where we're going.
Yeah, so on that sober note, that we have a responsibility as a community as well. So laws will happen, laws will take their own time. The Competition Commission in its current form will do what it does. Takes, and all over the world, take about 3 to 4 months before a case gets open, 6 to 7 months before it gets investigated, another 8 more months till the final order comes, then an appeal process which takes another 4 to 5 months, and then goes to the Supreme Court and sits there. The first DLFA case which happened, and the order was out, I think, if I'm not mistaken, in 2012, and we are in 2026. The final order is not yet out, and this is DLF, this is non-digital. Okay, so on that sober note, let us take some responsibility as consumers also, and perhaps, I guess, these optics also work, that the government is now saying we will use Zoho. Little bits, small little efforts on each one of us. And at least I think there is a lack of awareness what's happening, because as Nicholas pointed out, consumers are very happy, and consumers, so many of them are very happy, because and therefore regulation, which becomes a public good, because the larger ramifications on economy, state, and society, which will take time to manifest themselves, need to be understood by the governments, need to be understood by the policymaker, and therefore proper instruments, legal, non-legal, guidelines, soft law, all instruments need to be in place in order to get an ecosystem which promotes innovation and my concern is our startup community, so that they move up the value chain, not just in consumer tech, but in deep tech innovation. Thank you very much.